Conservatives, Ms. Goodridge, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for their testimony, and specifically to Gregory Sword for sharing about your daughter's circumstance. I really appreciate that. I'm going to start my questions to Dr. Judson. In your opening statement, you stated that both Health Canada and the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario have seemingly abdicated all responsibility for oversight. I was wondering if you could expand on that.
First started prescribing methadone, I had to get approval from Health Canada. I had to have a special exemption to be able to prescribe methadone. It was contingent on having taken a course in the prescribing of methadone, which outlined its neurochemistry and the effect on the pharmacokinetics of methadone. I had to meet such special requirements before the College of Physicians and Surgeons that I was in good standing to be able to prescribe opioids. And so those two authorities, the College and Health Canada, effectively screened me out as being someone who was going to be prescribing methadone for legitimate reasons, and the likelihood of over-prescribing, inappropriate prescribing was minimal. That seems to be not the case, just because the number of patients who are experiencing opioid misuse renders it far too difficult for them, for physicians. There are so many physicians treating that patient population that it's really impossible to keep controls over things. It would just consume far too much time. I presume. I can't say more than that.
Thank you. Could you, in your professional opinion, share what is the correlation between the availability of substances and the harms they cause?
Well, if you think not just of opioids, but recognize that all substance misuse is the problem. It doesn't matter what you use. It's the fact that an individual uses a substance that really defines what addiction is. And as long ago as the early 70s, soon after I opened up in practice, I was impressed by a research paper that had been published by a sociologist at the University of Western Ontario. His conclusion was that the more available alcohol is, the more alcohol is consumed. The more alcohol than is consumed, the more problems occur as a result. And that has recently been corroborated by a study conducted actually in Ontario, but published in the journal entitled Addiction, which is published in the UK, which looked at opioid use. And the conclusions were that the more opioids that are prescribed, the more opioids become available to all people for legitimate and illicit reasons, and the more problems occur as a result, including increased health issues and increased visits to emergency rooms. So those two reports, spanning a 50-year history space, indicate the more substances are available, the more problems there are going to be. And that's what we're witnessing as a result of these safe supply clinics, which are giving an abundant amount of opioids onto the street. And if they were better regulated, these clinics, then that would probably rein in the amount of opioids that are finding their way onto the streets.
Thank you. Dr. Conrad, I see you shaking your head, and could you perhaps expand and share your thoughts on that subject as well?
My understanding of the literature is very similar, so I concur with all of those comments. And it also puts people at risk. So the more substance use and in the adult population, the greater risk for a youth population, the more the liberal attitudes about substance use, the more young people are likely to use and at younger ages. And there's even studies demonstrating that proximity to alcohol outlets, for example, will influence young people's rates of substance use, alcohol use, for example. And I'll reiterate how concerned I am about the fact that opioid use amongst young people is rising. And what that means is that Canada will continue to have a very significant problem for decades to come.
I appreciate that. Greg, so how easy was it for your daughter to get access to these potent Dilaudid pills?
One message on either Snapchat or Instagram, and she would have someone delivering her whatever she wanted within 5 minutes. She could get dillies, cocaine, acid, alcohol, whatever she wanted. Even after she died, they were still messaging her cell phone. My friend had access to her Snapchat account, and they were still asking if she'd need any dillies.
Camilla's friends have said that dillies were widely available at their school. Can you expand on this? It terrifies me as a parent that high potent opioids are available in schools.
Most of the kids there would get the supply from someone who would go into the Vancouver East side, and they would be able to pick up a bunch of pills and bring them back into the smaller communities where I lived. And before my daughter died, there was 2 other girls in the same area who had died of the same thing with no mention of it. I only found out from other parents. It is so easy for these kids to get their hands on it because we don't monitor it in BC. We just hand out the pills, hope that the addicts will take them and not sell them for the drugs that they want. So they give them to the kids or to the gangs, and they come back out to the smaller communities. Thank you, Mr. Sword.